It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I am Rob, and this is my State of the Dungeon address. This is the address for the game that took place on the 21st of April, the year 2022. The game, Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, on the Dragon Heist Adventure Path. The all players were sort of in attendance. We have one remote, thanks to COVID. Thanks, COVID. But he was a full participant. And the rest of us were here, so it all worked out. So, what happened? First of all, the group is all now solidly second level. They finished all their training. Everybody's happy and perky and feels powerful. So now it's time to knock off some of those little problems that have been hanging around, and to try to, work through challenges, figure out which direction they're going to go. So the very first thing was to go and disgorge the duty that they had to deal with Halam, the monk, on the slopes of Mount Waterdeep for the Black Staff. Vajra had asked them to go and find out what information he had gathered about the threat of the, a threat to the city, but, could be anything. Could be the Zhentarim, who seemed to be rather active. So they went. There was a little to do beforehand, people getting a few things. For example, Luxor wanted a buckler, and a few things here and there, but nothing too serious. So, the group goes and they climb. Now, of course, you got two tabaxis, so climbing is not usually that big of an issue. And quite honestly, the rest of the group rolled really well, so they climbed. No problem. But, of course, it's not that easy. They get up to Halam, and Halam's not the most welcoming person. As a matter of fact, his primary means of offense seems to be insulting people, which he immediately lashed into Luxor. And Luxor's got a bit of a thin skin when it comes to being insulted. And he was refrained from violence, but Halam seemed to have scored several telling strokes without needing to use a bard's vicious mockery. He was pretty vicious as it was. And everybody got some. I mean, there wasn't anybody he talked to who he actually spoke in glowing terms to. But once the group showed that they could actually take an insult and not get fraught with a desire for revenge and violence, which pretty much again had Luxor sitting moping out at the entrance to the cave that they were up in. He gave them a bit of a prophecy, something about evil's twin, and going to make things rather interesting in the next through the season. So whatever could that mean? They didn't know, so they just took the words down, mostly relying on the memory of, because he wasn't going to repeat it, but the memory of Aldrich certainly helped. And all told, they got it all puzzled together, so it wasn't too bad. And they climbed back down, and hey, they got a win. They got what they were supposed to get. Everything was great. So they moved onward and decided to go right to Blackstaff Tower and tell her. So they did. This time they did not get a direct audience with the Blackstaff herself. Instead, they were teleported off the street into an antechamber. Her favorite apprentice came in and basically took their message and brought it back to Lady Blackstaff. And she came back and said, "Congratulations, ding, you get a point for Force Grey." Which, of course, in the financial straits they were in, didn't necessarily impress the group, but they really weren't promised a financial reward. And if they have the trust now of certain elements of the city guard, that might pay itself off in the not-so-distant future. Also, they were told to be ready, because it seems like things are picking up, and there's bound to be some action. And Force Grey could use their assistance if they want to get further in with Force Grey. this would be how you do it. So, with that happy circumstance over, they kind of broke about to do their own thing. Different people had different things to do. For the most part, it was about maintenance things. For example, Zarya and Jazor went off to go get supplies for their kitchen. Bowls and plates and things for everybody to eat off of, utensils to eat with, and Jazor, of course, has an exacting list of things that he would like to have, but this time he settled for the most basic culinary tools so that he could use his proficiency in cook's tools to make good food. He did so by making just sandwiches. Well, luck was not with him. But, it was perfectly fine, just not, the act of a master chef. It was decent food that kept everybody going. To which, at the very least, their live-in artificer, Khalees, was grateful to get a sandwich off of them, so yeah, it was good. And everybody got to eat just fine. A lot of the questions were, what happened to Pip? People were curious where Pip was. And it was to the point where they were going to start doing a manhunt. They didn't know where the boy ended up, and he doesn't tell anybody. By happy circumstance, though, Aldrich was going to go over to the booksellers because he has a scheme to make money. And he found Pip. Pip was there trying to learn to read from Reliaz, the owner of the shop. He didn't want to tell anybody he was learning to read, but he is trying to better himself and learn how to read. Which Aldrich was charmed by and kind of wants to take charge of his learning himself. But again, Reliaz doesn't mind teaching the boy. That's one of his signature joys, is helping people to learn and grow in their knowledge and love of literature. And so we'll see how that works out. I have a suspicion the group is going to be rather busy, so I don't know whether they're going to have a lot of time to tutor. Also, Aldrich's got a money-making scheme. What he went to the bookstore for was to buy a couple of blank books that could serve as spellbook primers. And basically, that's what he's doing, is he is scribing beginner spellbooks, and with the hopes of selling them to people who want to, take their first few steps out and, get some basic spells in their spell book right away that they could just buy his books and immediately transfer some useful spells right into their books. As a way to make money. As a matter of supply and demand, he'll find out if that's something that will... He was pretty cocksure that this was going to work and make him a killing. So it will remain to be seen. But he is hard at work on that venture. For the most part, perhaps it was the remoteness, but Felix wasn't really all that motivated to go doing anything too overwhelming. Continued working on the grounds of the manor, which he now has in pretty nice shape. He's obviously a person who's good at nudging nature and making things look a little bit better. But while he was doing this, an old man came upon him while he was out near the street and told him a sad story about how the Zhentarim are making people's lives miserable just one ward away in the Field Ward, which is just to the north of the ward they're in, which is the North Ward. The Field Ward is one of the more modern expansions of the city. Basically a cluster of huts and low-grade houses that the laborers for the fields use for their shelter, and it does have an outer wall protecting it. Well, supposedly, the Zhentarim are stirring up local gangs to cause problems and to torment the people who are there. Why they're being such provocateurs, he didn't know, but he knows the Zhents are behind it. And this is the kind of thing that if a young group of up-and-comers want to make a difference, this is how they could do it. No promises, just a statement, and Felix immediately pounced on that like a well, like a tabaxi on a ball of yarn. And he brought this to the group, and the group's like, yeah, we can't let the Zhentarim get away with this. Oh, we should help. So at various points, they took a little bit for them to all come back together again, but they did, and they all agreed that this was something that they can do. Also still hanging over their heads, of course, was the murders going on out on the docks. That still hasn't been solved. But now, Luxor is a little iffy about this. It turns out that some of the people famous for using the Gond weapons, well, not necessarily famous, but at least they're underworld known for doing it. Apparently, the rogue group, the Braganduath, which was something like that, the group of dark elves, who are kind of their own force in the town, apparently are known to use similar weapons. And the detective work that Luxor had paid for proved that the assailant themselves were an elf of some sort, very likely a dark elf. So now Luxor is caught. He's like, one side wants him to go and take care of the murderer. The other side says, wait a minute, I don't want to get into the bad side of this knit group of underworld dark elves. That might be terrible. That might lead to my very short career. So he sent a request. He went to the Yawning Portal, where he had first made contact with the Sun Elf, who appears to be part of a somewhat sinisterly reputed group that he's so far stayed on the positive side of and earned a little money through, to demand more money, because this suddenly got to be much bigger than he thought. And he approached his old friend Durnan, who is his contact in the town, and Durnan says, you know who you're messing with there, boy. And he said he was. And he's like, all right. Well, I don't deal with them, but if you want to get in contact, they're always watching the Yawning Portal, because they're very interested in the comings and goings of the adventurers of the town, especially the more powerful movers and shakers, for when they come into town. So Luxor's like, okay, great. So do you know who's watching the place now? And he's like, yeah, all right, outside the street there's a bench, and there's a woman who's been sitting there now for several hours nursing a bottle that she hasn't really taken an honest swallow out of since she's been there. She's just sitting there watching everybody, and I can smell them by now. I know she's a Zhent. Okay, great. I'm going to go talk to her. Luxor goes out and talks to her. Goes out, plops down on the bench next to this woman, and of course Durnan was dead right. He's pretty good at what he does. And he made oblique gestures that he needs to talk to the elf. And she's like, he doesn't need to talk to you. Well, we need to talk about something I'm doing for him. Why haven't you done it yet? It's suddenly a lot more dangerous. Well, maybe you aren't all that we thought you were. So maybe, we don't need to talk to you anymore. So a not so subtle tone that told him maybe he better get on that and take a better look at it if he's interested in pursuing that, which he, of course, is not obliged to do. Almost all of these things are purely optional, which is funny because some members of the group are already bemoaning the fact that everybody wants something from them. Everybody wants a favor. Everybody wants them to do something rather than just sit around and mope at the inn. That's a problem for some people, I guess. I don't know. But at least it's a variety of interesting things going on. So when the group all got back together again, it was starting to get later. And now is probably a good time to go. Most of the farmhands are going to be coming in after their days of removing rocks and tilling lines and seeding for the spring. So, they're probably back at home and, eating or so on. Maybe some of the young men are out, having a few to get to bed quicker, but that's all going to be the low-class taverns and such because they don't have a lot of money, which makes sense. So, if there was going to be a time when these provocateurs were going to come around and skirt around the city watch and try to cause trouble, that's probably now. So they all set off together as a group. Again, 5 armed adventurers walking out into the field ward. The guards looked at that and go, "What are you guys doing?" But, they don't question adventurers. Remember, Waterdeep has a pretty high opinion of a lot of local heroes and adventurers. So when they're traveling along, for example, with somebody who looks like a paladin of Selenae, and an elf who's dressed like a noble, you don't ask a lot of questions, really. I mean, they could have been his entourage or the elf. They could all be an adventuring party with a paladin as their leader. They don't necessarily know that they're just kind of a loose band of people who all have their own ideas and goals and just go off and do their own stuff. But it's a nice thought, and they got the benefit of the doubt, and they went into the field ward. And it really didn't take a lot before they realized something was very wrong. The atmosphere was tense. And they could hear sounds of the guard yelling and shouting at people. And they heard the sounds of another disturbance in the other direction. I mean, the field ward itself is relatively narrow. It's not very deep, but it stretches along the entire northern perimeter of the town, all the way to the Troll Downs on the one side and to the northeast corner of town, banked by various towers and defensive works. So they could see the outer walls, and the walls screening off the north ward were right behind them. So, there's only so much room in this place. And as a group of, decently powered adventurers at their young age, it's a small place for them to find trouble. So they went to look for trouble, and they found trouble quite quickly. They found a group of young, drunk toughs who were being accosted by a group of folks who were themselves armed and just being insulting, trying to provoke them, whatever they could do, making various allegations about the purity of their parentage to livestock. It was pretty crass stuff, and their leader was kind of intimidating. He was actually wearing some armor, but he had this bit of leather wrapped over his head, and it had spikes studded throughout, so it looked somewhat intimidating. The rest of his armor looked like patchwork hide, so he looked kind of wild, and well, the group moved to step in, as the group would. And when they did that, Zarya, of course, took the lead. She is never shied away from being the point gal with the group. And the guy said, "Wench, go back to a kitchen and make me a sandwich." Those could go down as famous last words, because she punched him right in the face. Wham! She raged, she punched, she hit, she spiked her own hand, but she's raging, she didn't care. And she smashed his nose, just blood. Broken nose. No, those aren't fun. But, yeah, bam! Most people don't like getting punched in the face all that much. What he really liked less, though, was when Jazor turns around and he rolls a nat 20 to punch him. He actually took the time to lift the strip off of protecting his nose and punch him right above the nose, right in the forehead. Instant stars. Did not knock him out. Turns out he's actually tougher than just a common street tough that he looked like. But he was actually a gang leader. So. But did not knock him out, interestingly enough. And with that kind of intimidation, as an intimidation check was made, they went, we don't really want to be here, guys. Let's go. The guards are probably going to be coming. With the exception of the leader, who was, again, a little too dazed to go running off, and one guy who really rolled well on his morale to stick around. He wanted to stay by the boss. So when the others took off, he was like, gee, boss. And the boss was like, good, you get them. And he ran away. Well, now he's by himself. He's like, I give up. He wasn't going to fight against 5 armed adventurers. No. So the one who was running away, for some reason, Felix got a little bloody-minded and pulled out his bow, shot him in the buttocks. Well, he said he was aiming for the buttocks, so he was not aiming for a lethal blow. So when he hit, the guy pitched over. The subdual damage he took from the punches was not lethal damage in and of itself. He eventually would have worn that off, although the nose would have taken a while to mend. So basically, he passed out from the abuse, is how that worked out. So, the farmers were impressed, especially one young lad who was very impressed with Zarya. She looked so awesome when she punched him in the face. And he is now thoroughly puppy love. He even went off and got her, picked a bunch of dead daisies from the prior year. The only thing he had, so he was like, gives that to her. It was cute. But of course, he's a commoner farmhand, so not a potential NPC for her to adopt, it seems. But we'll see. I'm not ruling anything out at this point. But the group went over and they checked over the fallen. None of them had any Zhentarim ties. No tattoos, no tags, no brands, no parchments, nothing. But what they did notice is that they had oil and tinderboxes, which perfect for arson. Ooh, now they're not just provocateurs. Maybe they could also potentially be arsonists. So if there's any fires that break out, they've got somebody to say, hey, look, there's a concerted effort here. They also found the guy had a really nice short sword, much better than a common thug would have. So maybe that was his price. Who knows? About this time, the watch does show up because they're spread out throughout the ward, and they eventually came over. By this time, the group is rolling him. And we all know how much the watch loves to see people, picking over a freshly mugged foe. So they had to investigate that, and all of a sudden the group kind of looks suspicious as they're standing over a guy who looks like he's been beaten and shot in the butt with an arrow. So the guard's like, what are you doing? And again, they managed to talk their way out of it, largely because of Eldrick. Aldrich has certain advantages in being of a noble house, and it's playing off that the Watch doesn't really want to make a scene with him. They really don't. But if they actually can pin a murder on him, that might be different. So if he had gone down from Spellfire, for instance, there we go. We only see one of you who looks likely to be a wizard. But in this case, the murder weapon, he's not dead, but was the arrow sticking out of his butt. And one person in the group has a warbow. That would be Felix. So the guard came over and they're like, this was self-defense, was it? Group of 5 armed adventurers against this riffraff, huh? And they're like, we stopped a fight from happening. We protected these farmhands. And he looks at them, and none of them have been hit. None of the party has been hurt or roughed up or inconvenienced, really, outside of having to be in the field ward at night when they probably want to do something else. So they're like, okay, just tell us who threw the first punch. And they had to, because there were witnesses. It would have looked really bad if they'd have said he did it. They said Zarya punched him first, and he's like, okay. Great. You assaulted a citizen. There's a certain... This is a video. This is Magic. Magic likes coming up here when I make videos. You should know this by now. So she is very happy when she's on camera. See? Say hi to everyone, Magic. She's not going to say hi. So, they glared at Zarya a bit, mean-mugged her. But for the most part, they were like, okay. They got their names and where they live, and they're like, oh, you own property in town. Well, we don't have to worry about you running away. Just make yourselves available. A magistrate will come and will make a ruling on your case of assault, which can have a fine up to 10 days in prison, 1,000 gold pieces, and assorted other, enough to make it stick that you probably shouldn't go around assaulting people. Because, you have to be on the right side of the law if you're going to operate a business in Waterdeep, right? So the group was not impressed, but Doesn't look like they were very mollified either, except that they're like, we're going to get out of this ward. We don't want to do this anymore. And for the most part, there really wasn't any huge negative ramifications of all of this because, again, the guards recognized that, yeah, for the most part, the group was probably trying to do something decent. But all the same, the law is the law, and they've got to enforce the law. It was also somewhat helped by the fact that Luxor went out, touched his butt, took out the arrow, healed him a little bit, which did wake up the miscreant who they took down.
Jazar. Not Luxor.
Yeah, Jazar. If Luxor touched his butt, it was purely platonic. But, yeah, Jazor did that, because he's a paladin and he can do that. So at least that stopped any kind of infection or anything, although it didn't heal all the damage. That bow does some damage. And he didn't heal him fully of that. The guy woke up, the guards are like, "Whoo, buddy, we've got some talking to do." And they took him off to the Hooskow. So, the group's like, "That's it, we're done. There's no point. The watch will be watching out for us now. They're not going to let us do anything, and we're just done." So, they go back. And sure enough, that old man is still in front of their house. And he was like, "So, heard you had a bit of excitement, eh?" And they're like, "Yeah." It's like, "Can I come in?" "Sure, come on in." So they go in together after, they told a little bit about their woes to this old man. And he comes in and he takes off his broad-brimmed hat, and all of a sudden, it's a woman wearing chain armor and a tabard of the Tetherian Knights. Now, Tether is not adjacent to Waterdeep. She's been around a bit. But she's also wearing the heraldry of Tyr. She is a devotee of Tyr, god of justice. And they guessed right away, "You're from the Order of the Gauntlet, aren't you?" For those of you not familiar with the various factions of the Sword Coast, the Order of the Gauntlet are ardent foes of evil. And they're not just there to politically do things. They're kind of the blunt force trauma of good. And they try to beat evil and make sure that it doesn't hurt people. They often get aided in this by the Harpers, who tell them information about others, and they can sometimes work in conjunction with the Lord's Alliance, making sure that the enemy of the Lord's Alliance, if they're evil, are the ones that get punched. So, they can sometimes be prickly allies, though, because they don't take to politics with evil. They just want to see it punched. So, she laid out her case. She's like, "Okay, you don't have a lot of tact in this group. I understand that, and that's fine. We don't necessarily need politicians. We don't need people who have diplomacy. But sometimes it's useful. If you want to work with the Order of the Gauntlet, we'd welcome your assistance. We're just not going to ask you to do things that require any restraint. If you're going to immediately start attacking somebody who looks like they are the belligerent, rather than getting the law on your side, rather than using all of the powers at your command to subdue and repress so you can get information out of them, that's probably going to be useful in some things that we do for a group that can do that. But if you are the kind that just want to be thrown at a large, toothy problem, fine. There's a lot of people who don't do that kind of thing, and we'd be fine with that. The group is lukewarm. She didn't offer them riches, wealth, or anything. She just offered them a cause. And she did kind of hint, "Hey, you're going to be talking to a magistrate in the near future. We are really close with Tyr, the judge, the lawbringer, who most of those guys swear to. So I'm just saying we might be able to help you out, and it wouldn't be a bad thing to have allies if you might occasionally be having brushes with the law in the interest of doing good deeds. We might be able to help you with that." And there's no denying, the Order of the Gauntlet do have strong allies, and they do have strong representatives. So it is yet another faction that there are definite pros and cons to joining, just like Force Grey, just like the Lord's Alliance, just like the Harpers. All of these groups have dangled their hooks, because this group has been very visible, and now there's all these people who are interested in seeing what they can do. Kick the tires and light the fires, as it were. So the group's like, We don't want to call that as a loss that we got chased out before the Zents, did anything further. Some of the group, again, seems like they're kind of getting really surly at being asked to do all these different missions, but they really just want to have one nice thing that they can sink their teeth into, make a lot of money, and be happy about. But that hasn't come up yet. They just don't have the reputation to be invited to those big things at this point, and it's a different pace than other games that this group has played, so it's a little understandable. So, back to the field war. We're gonna take care of this problem. We're gonna end it with a win. We'll use a little bit more diplomacy and see what we can get accomplished. Well, when they went back in, this time there was an ambush. It's no secret that this group is an enemy to the Zents, despite some of their makeup. And the Zents resent being targeted. They don't like it. And if you stick your finger in their eye, they're going to punch back. And in this case, it was an attack on the group to teach them a lesson. I thought a fairly cleverly made one, too. As they were going along through the field ward, which again is largely made up of makeshift huts and hovels and lean-tos and shacks that people live in. Not always, by the way, too. Not all these people are full-time residents. Sometimes they're just there to work the fields. So the buildings aren't exactly the nicest, but they're in clusters and congregations, and there are alleys. Out of one of these alleys charged a bull at the party. And the group was perceptive enough to see that this bull had been maddened. It had been lashed on its rear flanks numerous times to inflict pain and get it maddened. Bulls have a temper anyhow, but this person was really good at it. Well, this whole thing could be avoided because Aldrich immediately cast a sleep spell, the guardian angel of first and second level characters. Except the bull wasn't the weakest character in range of that spell. The person who got it mad was, and he dropped. That's how the spell works. The bull was himself not affected. But that wasn't all. This was a well thought out ambush. 2 arrows streaked from that alley and nailed Aldrich. Hefty damage, enough to bring him down to 0, but they were poisoned as well, with a sleep poison. Somebody had designs on the group, eh? So Aldrich drops, takes him right out of the combat. Okay. So Felix immediately, no, that's not happening to us. He immediately uses his climb movement speed, goes up onto the... Oh, no, actually he didn't. He used his feline agility to pounce and shoot down the alley, and he saw that there's a raised wall down the alley, just boards that have been put up, and 2 men with bows firing off the top of it. So he fired an arrow and gashed one in the head badly. Again, Felix hits hard. And as a sharpshooter, the fact that he was shooting behind cover didn't protect him at all. So, yeah, Felix, pretty deadly with that bow. We'll see how he is with everything else, but the bow, nobody's questioning. He's not somebody you want that pointed at. So, he also did notice that these guys planned this out a little bit. They had caltrops in front of the wall, so if anybody charged at the wall, they were going to get hurt. Okay. Loxor used his climb ability. He had 2 tabaxis in the group. They kind of blend a little bit. I don't know. He climbed up to the cornice of the building that formed the front end of the alleyway so he could get a good look. And with that vantage point, he was able to look down and see that the bull was attacking, which, yeah. And he could see where those arrows came from. It was those guys over at the wall. So he, arcane, Eldritch Blast. The cover saved the guy. He does not have sharpshooter with that. So the guy did not get hit. The cover took a bit of a beating. But he had a good vantage point, which will help down the road. So the group starts taking on this bull. The bull does not have very good armor class, but it's tough. Zarya nails it hard. Loxor hits it hard. The bull is in rough shape. It trampled Zarya. It hit her with the horns on a charge. It trampled her down. Zarya got tagged pretty good by this thing. Zarya did not rage right away on this, so she's taken full damage on all of this. And Loxor, of course, or Jazor, has to go over and check on and try to save Aldrich. He uses his lay on of hands to heal the damage, but he's still unconscious because of the poison. So Zarya is going toe-to-toe with the bull by herself at this point, because Aldrich's down, the ranged combatants are going after the archers. Then 3 horsemen break out from the dark. They didn't get very much of a look at these guys. 2 of them had scimitars. One of them was a horse archer. And this guy was using that same paralytic poison. So as they come out, the guys with the scimitars did very little. I rolled poorly. On the other hand, the guy with the arrow shot Jazor, or shot Laxa. Jazor, I'm getting it. All these names, 5-letter names. Why? Why did you do this to me? Anyhow. Jazor gets hit. He's a paladin. He's tough. He's got a huge constitution. He rolled a 2. He falls to the ground. Unconscious. It's kind of starting to look a bit grim. But Aldrich shakes off the poison, and he starts to get himself together. Zarya... Actually, I think by this time was Luxor or Jazor that finished off the bull.
Yeah.
He finished it off with his sword. The bull is dead. These guys came out, shot Jazor, thunk. And now it's Zarya against two guys on horseback who are using the horse's speed to make her run and chase, which she doesn't have a problem with. She's fast herself, so she can go after them. They can't just attack her with impunity. The archer also suddenly had a hard time hitting anybody. While this is going on, Felix gets to the wall. He, gets to the wall, climbs. And by this time, he was missed by a single shot from that lone sniper who was left. The one who was wounded runs away. And as he makes it pretty clear that he's going to try to climb up, the other sniper gets down, breaks something, and starts running down the alley. Luxor gets up, takes a look, and sees that there's some fire starting below the wall. Apparently this guy has flammable materials up on either side to start the buildings on either side on fire. Dirty pool. But he indulges in taking one last shot at the guy running away, and right in the back of the head. Drops him dead. It was a beautiful shot. No questions about it. By this time, Luxor is running along the roof to go and support him, and sees that the one guy has dropped. So there's only one guy left running out to the outside of the alleyway. And Luxor uses his burst of speed and runs off after him, to find out that this wounded sniper has come out in a kind of a clear space. It's another adjoining street. There's a wagon and a couple of people who look suspicious. 2 really big, strong people standing about 8 feet tall. They're huge, massive, and built. And then there's this diminutive elf. And there's one other shadowy person he couldn't get any real good details of. And the sniper comes out and he's talking to them. So what does Luxor do? He comes up and he casts Charm Person quickly and quietly on the sniper and says, "Hey friend, what's going on?" And the elf goes, one of your friends is coming. And he raises up this wall of thorns and creepers to barricade the end of the alley, to stop Felix from running it. And he says, well, this is just a little bit of business. Your group is prying and pushing in places they shouldn't be. So we wanted to send a message. And so we just killed the elf. If we didn't, he's certainly going to know that we tried. And yeah, that should be... If the others got a little bit banged up, misdirected, whatever, I mean, you're fine. If you want to come with us and leave them behind, they're messing with things they really shouldn't, and it's going to go badly for them. So if you want to, come with us, you can, and you're going to get rich and powerful with us. He's like, they're my friends. I don't really want to leave them at this point. I'm still going to stick with them, but, we're cool, right? He's like, yeah, here. Flips him 10 gold in a pouch. He's like, okay, we're going to go. So good luck. We've got more work to do tonight. He's like, thanks. And they took off. Felix only heard a little bit, not enough to incriminate or indemnify Loxor, so he's fine. So Loxor climbs up and over, rejoins Felix. Felix found out that there were more caltrops strung throughout, because that's basically what they were doing. Was they had some cleverly arranged caltrops that they could drop swaths of them as they were running. They actually search the bodies more, they'll actually find that neat little trick they've got. But at any rate, at this point, things weren't looking good for Jazor, because he rolls a natural 1 on his next saving throw to try to throw off the poison. And everyone's like, ooh. And I'm like, okay, grab your character sheet. We're going to go over there. Do I need to bring dice? Yeah, let's bring a die. So I had him troop over. And what was revealed to him was that Selene favors him and had one of her prized ancient heroes come and basically awarded him with a sword that he will build and enhance with his own deeds. Right now it is merely an alchemical silver unbreakable sword, not inherently magical, seemingly, although clearly it's very nice with a nice crescent moon crossguard, and it's nice. But basically he was said, you're on the path now. This sword will only break if you do. So, bring it honor. It will be as beautiful and as amazing as it was when it served me. But it is to only be the tool. It is not to overshadow you. It is your deeds that will eventually bring light to the darkness and save the people who call on Selene for assistance. So he was happy with that. He seemed to like his new sword, even if it isn't, oh my gosh, oh wow, this is the most awesome, powerful sword ever. It's not, but it will eventually get pretty good. Also dropped that it has the potential to grow into a holy avenger, which is always special. And with that, Jazor wakes up. Aldrich has woken up, and he decides, there's horses all over the place, and things are a chaotic mess. Fog cloud. Now nobody can see. This protects Zarya from archers, because that archer was still out there. So that protected her. It did cause some problems for one of the horsemen. And the other horseman, I did forget, there was a team up. They were attacking the horse. And eventually it was exploded by a very nice shot. I have to give credit. Very nice shot from Loxor, who blew up the horse. That was combined with a booming blade from Aldrich, who waited as it ran by and nailed him. So, yeah, the horse didn't make it, but the guy who was on it was amazing. All of these guys showed advanced horsemanship techniques, more so than just you do to common, a common rider. And he didn't, even though the horse died under him, he just rolled off the steed and dashed into the darkness of the alleys opposite. So, yeah, these guys were assassins, certainly of some renown, some esteem. So they're not just playing with amateurs here, but they managed to hold up, and they did kill one of the snipers. So, the ambush was foiled. And hey, they killed the bull, so stakes for everyone, I guess. And that is where we close the night. The group has kind of been a bit pounded. Of course, Jazor's happy to have his new sword, but all told, now they know. They are on the track of the Zhentarim. The Zhentarim have taken notice of them and have decided they're going to start stepping up things against them, which makes the whole thing just that much more interesting, doesn't it? I think it does. So, at any rate, that is where we ended, and we are ready to take on the next time we play, trying to figure out the aftermath of their first actual fight against the Zhentarim. So, until next time, thank you very... Oh, and by the way, I do have to say, they did, with the guard, check the body of the person who was felled by Felix, and yes, he does have the mark of the Zhentarim, the winged snake, on his arm. So there's no doubt these were Zhentarim assailants, which the guard was happy to see. Less Zents means less work for them, right? So they actually got a 25 gold piece reward, which it sounded like Felix had claimed, since he is the one who downed the foe. But considering they's got bills to pay, I don't know how that actually got disposed. They weren't all happy with the idea of throwing it into the house. So, but that's where we stopped. A little bit of looting, but for the most part, yeah, they weathered the attack and ready to go on to the next great thing. So, thank you for joining me. I will see you next time. I'm Rob, and this has been my State of the Dungeon address. Until next time, farewell.